Hi. Hi. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and thanks a lot, Lizzie, for organising these sessions. Obviously, it's a really strange time at the moment, so it's great to be able to use this time to kind of share and talk. So, thanks very much. So my name's Sol Milne. I'm a PhD student from the University of Aberdeen, and I'm going to talk a bit about my research on orangutan ecology. So I've been working in Sabah in northeastern Borneo for the past about 3 years. And it's here in right the north of Borneo. Um, and I've been studying orangutan ecology and how they can deal with large scale changes in the landscape. And that means how they can survive when changes like logging and conversion for agriculture happening in the landscape. So my work is centered around using drones to study the landscape by flying over large areas of forest in order to find their nests, so I can see how they're using the habitat and where their nests are distributed. So, just a bit of background. Orangutans are orangutan means person, forest, so it's forest person. Obviously, they're extremely well adapted to living in the forest, and they actually used to have a range all across Southeast Asia, but now they're just restricted to Borneo and Sumatra, and there are three species still alive. There actually used to be a giant orangutan called Gigantopithecus, which was slightly less Planet of the Apesy than it comes across here. Um, but currently there are three species of orangutan, and I'm studying the northeastern Borneo subspecies, Pongo pygmaeus morio. Now, these species are very interesting because they're adapted to survive in a really interesting forest environment. They Orangutans are kind of unique because they spend an awful lot of time with their mothers when they're infants. So when orangutans are born, they stay with the mothers for up to about 9 years, which compared to other great apes is a really long time. Usually chimps and gorillas stay for around maybe 5 years, but orangutans actually stay for much longer. And this is because orangutans need to learn some pretty complex behaviors in order to survive in the wild. So firstly, a very complex behavior, which is very important to their survival, is nest building. So a lot of people don't know this, but orangutans build nests. I don't know how these are looking on your end, but orangutans build nests. They build a new nest almost every single day, and they use these for sleeping. They pad them out with a lot of leaves, and occasionally actually add umbrellas as well for the rain. There are a lot of reasons for this. Firstly, they're dry. So obviously it's a rainforest, and so it rains a lot. If you're dry on a platform, the water drains through, and you can keep dry through the night. And that's really important because even in tropical rainforests, animals still can actually get hypothermia, enormous, and occasionally clouded leopards as well. And generally, if a predator's on the ground, they don't usually look up. So they keep the orangutan safe and dry. But obviously, it's a very difficult thing to do. They build a nest like this every single day, and it's not easy. I think if we went out and tried to build a nest now, which you shouldn't do, I think 99.9% of us would probably fall out of the tree. So obviously, it's a really complex behavior, and it's one that has to be taught. And so when orangutans build nests and when mothers build nests, they communicate that to their juvenile how to build a nest and how to build it safely so that they can be sure that when they're sleeping at night, they don't fall out the tree. So it's a really important behavior and it's, yeah, important for their survival. So I'm looking at orangutan nests, and they're very useful because my work is based around using drones. Um, so I've always been a bit of a nerd and always been into robots, and so I'm always really interested in using drones to study their habitat. Now, orangutans are unique in the nest building because unlike gorillas who build their nests on the ground and chimpanzees who build their nests kind of a little higher up, usually below the canopy, orangutans usually build them above the canopy. So when you're flying over, you can actually see them. So it's actually, this isn't the drone we use in the field, but the drone we use for the project is actually still out there, still being used. But we use it to collect images like this. This is a really good example here. This is a nest we got from one of our first surveys. So you can see it built a large nest right on top of the canopy, and you can see it broken two branches over and folded them. So that's really typical of a orangutan nest. So field work was pretty difficult, and it took a lot of testing to find the right drone to use and the right methods. Initially, we actually built a drone from scratch. So this is a fixed wing drone. Fixed wing means like a plane, so with two wings, whereas a copter, propellers, copter. So a fixed wing drone is really useful because it's very efficient. It's got one propeller, which means it can fly for a really long time. This one flew for about an hour before it lost battery, so really handy, and only a few crashes. And the useful thing about the drone work as well is it's a really simple. Well, it's a very learnable skill, and I started off knowing nothing about this work, and I'm really encouraged by how easy it was to learn and how much fun it is as well. So me and this guy Dalf started off around the same time, and now he's a much better pilot than I am, and he's still doing this kind of work for forestry surveys. Um, so yeah, very much into drones, and this kind of surveying is extremely useful because, as you say, orangutans build the nests on top of trees. Um, and so one part of the work is looking for where they build the nests and where they are in relation to where people are. We want to see maybe if the distance from where buildings are and where agriculture is happening, whether that's having an effect on them. But we're also really interested in looking at their feeding behavior because orangutans are kind of the masters of phenology. Now, phenology is the timing of biological events. So, say when daffodils bloom in the spring or when flowers come through, there's a lot of science around at predicting that timing and how sort of the atmosphere and how global temperatures are affecting that. A big region of concern at the moment is that phenology is changing because of climate change. Um, Now, phenology is extremely important for orangutans because they somehow know exactly when the fruit and the flowers are gonna arrive. Whenever there's a big fruiting happening, they're always there. When individual trees are fruiting, they know where and when to arrive in order to get the food. It's really interesting. So this is part of the reason as well why that sort of behavior with the mother, why learning to feed alongside the mother is so important, because it's through that interaction that orangutans learn how to know which fruit to eat, when it's going to arrive, and where to look for it. So it's a really important bit of information, and it's information that is passed down over a long time, and it's what they call a vertical transmission. So it's from one generation to the next. It's a really important period of time for orangutan's life, and it's important for me because I'm looking at how they interact with one particular group of trees called Strangler figs. So in Southeast Asia, the tree group is called Diptera. There's just a bit of background. Diptera, mean di meaning two, and ptero meaning fruit, meaning wings. Sorry, two-winged fruit essentially, and they're quite a unique group of trees. They produce fruit all together at once every kind of 5 years. Produce a huge amount of fruit, and all the animals in the forest basically have all the food they could dream of for a very short period of time. But in between those kind of 5 year cycles, and there's a bit of variation in whether it's 5 years. In between these periods of big fruiting, there's actually not much food available. So um, orangutans have learned to sort of predict when other fruiting events are going to happen, when other tree species are producing fruit. And so strangler fig trees are extremely important for that reason. Strangler figs provide a huge amount of fruit and are a very important resource for orangutans because they fruit almost constantly, like 2 or 3 times throughout the year. So they're always available as a food source. Now, they're a really interesting group of trees. So they're what's known as a hemi-epiphyte because they grow as epiphyte grows in the top of a tree or it grows externally on a tree, but these actually send roots down. So they start deposited in the dung of usually a bird or a fruit bat in the branches. And then eventually they grow. There's a little bit of soil actually in tops of tall trees. There's soil there. And they actually germinate in the trees and they send these roots down all the way. And eventually they sort of begin to travel up and grow and sort of take hold of the tree as well. They eventually kind of, it's called a strangler, but actually it's not really strangling the tree. It's sort of eventually getting hold and sort of encompassing this tree and this network of roots and branches. Um, what happens is that it doesn't actually strangle the tree like mechanically, physically, but it outcompetes it for light. So In the rainforest, light is an extremely valuable resource. That's why when you see the tops of trees, they're all quite close together because they're all competing for that space to get light. But usually the strangler fig grows faster. And so the original tree it's deposited in can't get enough light and can't get enough food. So eventually that tree dies. And now it's not like a sudden thing, it happens about after about 30 years. But with the really truly mature ones, you get something like this, which is, I think, is really beautiful. You get the original tree dies and rots away, and you're left with this massive exoskeleton tree. Now, these are really important to orangutans because they provide a huge amount of food, and also they provide a lot of calcium as well. Incidentally, there's a really good book called Ladders to Heaven. No, sorry, Ladders to Heaven. Gods, Wasps, and Strangler Figs by Mike Shanahan, which has more info about this. But yeah, figs provide a huge amount of food for orangutans, and they're important because they have a lot of calcium in them. Now, if you're an animal living on top of trees, calcium is really important because it's pretty likely that at some point in your life you're going to fall and break a bone. So having a high calcium diet is really important, and fig trees are vital for this. So I've been studying where these trees are as well using the drone. So flying over the forest, you can actually see them. You can spot them in the canopy because of the way they grow. And so I'm trying to understand where orangutans are building their nests in relation to where these strangler figs are. And this is important because orangutans themselves generally range over a very large area. They usually have, I think they can range up to like 5 kilometers within a forest in a day. And that's usually in order to find enough food because orangutans, they're as big as people, really, even bigger. Like you get like, adult flanged orangutan can be more than 100 kilos. So they're big animals. They need a lot of food and end up traveling large areas. But the problem is that because of a lot of forest conversion, the forest available in Borneo is actually, and across Southeast Asia, it's very fragmented. Of course, we've lost a lot of forest, but it's also the forest that's remaining, and there's a lot of forest remaining, but it's fragmented, and so it's difficult to get from one section of forest to the other. Now, generally, males are better at crossing from one patch of forest to the other, so it's very useful that these strangler fig trees are often left after logging occurs. So, strangler figs, also known as banyan trees, are very culturally important too. They're known to, in some cases, kind of harbor spirits. They're known to be, they have cultural significance. They're kind of revered. And so, a lot of the time, they actually aren't logged when areas of forest are converted to, say, oil palm. So, you'll see oil palm plantation, and there'll still be figs in there. And occasionally, orangutans will actually go through those plantations to those fig trees. But often in degraded forest that hasn't been converted to oil palm, but is still just logged forest, male orangutans and sometimes females will cross large areas on the ground in order to reach that resource. And that's important because orangutans are evolved to move through the trees. It's called brachiation. They grab hold of one branch and they move to the next. They use their body weight to bring the branch over. You know how like Tarzan gets the vine and he swings? Orangutans do a kind of version of that. They don't swing necessarily, but they use their weight to pull the branch and then get to the next tree. It's actually a really efficient method of movement. But when you start to log forest, orangutans more often have to climb down the tree, cross along the ground until they get to the next section of forest. So that costs more energy. For us, it's easy because we're used to walking, but orangutans, it's a lot more expensive energetically. So it also puts them at risk of, say, predators or sometimes people as well. So when you have areas of forest that are logged, but there are still fig trees present, it's really important that I lost my train of thought. When you have when areas of forest have been logged, it's really important the fig trees are still there because it means that despite there not being many trees, and despite it being much more difficult to travel across that landscape, orangutans will still go because there's a food source available. And that's really important because orangutans themselves are seed dispersers. They carry seeds in their stomach, and when they leave their dung, they leave seeds that will potentially germinate. That's kind of a really important part of the reforestation process. And also other birds like hornbills also carry a lot of seeds in their dung as well. So having figs present in degraded forests is really important, and it also is important to connecting different areas of forest, because when some males move from forest patch to forest patch, they'll know, because of everything their mothers have taught them, they'll know that there's a fig tree fruiting at a particular time. They'll cross that area of forest and they know there'll be some food, and that's an incentive to actually disperse and travel large distances. And they know that when they get to the next patch of forest, there might be other orangutans there, and that's very important. Because of the way the forest is split up and fragmented, the populations of orangutans are very complex in themselves. It's called a metapopulation. They're split up in space, but being connected by different males moving through the landscape means that the long-term kind of genetic health of the population can be maintained. So it's really important. So the sort of interesting output of work I've been doing, and with my fantastic supervisors and collaborators, is just understanding that fig trees in degraded forests are really important, and forest that has been logged is still really important habitat for orangutan. So when you see that forest has been logged but is in the process of being restored, it's actually still really important habitat for orangutans. And lastly, I just want to leave you with, if you're looking for a project to do during this self-isolation time, build a drone. They're great. They're easy to use, and it's a good kind of home project. And yeah, thanks for listening. So now I'm going to turn to your questions. As I named the trees are Strangler fig trees. How was the surveying done before drones? That's a fantastic question. So when we did these drone surveys, we would do them on the ground and also with the drone as well. So we walk along the ground. We walk about 2 kilometers straight in the forest, which sounds like not very far, but when you're in the forest and it's almost impossible to walk through because it's so thick, and you fall over and get attacked by bees and chased by elephants, it's difficult on the ground. But usually you walk in a straight line, or as straight as you can go, and you count as many nests as you can see. And then what you do is you can limit the distance that you in forest, which is very thick, it's hard to see very far, and so you have a limited distance. So when you spot a nest, you record the species of tree it's made in, the size of it, whether any individuals present, and from a set of information from the area you cover, you can actually estimate the size of the population there. So it's a really useful method. With the drones, we're doing the same thing, but from a much larger area. And that's actually, and the line transects work. The work on the ground is still the standard method of surveying now. The young ones, what can they learn about? Where can they learn more about your work in orangutans? Okay, that's a great question. So in the info on this video, there's a link to zooniverse.com, and the project's on there, where we show all the images from the drone surveys and have a lot of background on the project. So have a go on Zooniverse and see if you can find some orangutan nests. You mentioned the orangutans help with seed dispersal. Do any species of plant exclusively rely on this? I don't know. I have to think about that, but I wouldn't have thought so. I think they're enough seed dispersing animals throughout the rainforest that actually they all rely on a large number of species to disperse. Some fruit are very specialized for fruit bats, because fruit bats often eat fruit and then throw it up again to get rid of the seeds because they're too heavy to fly with. So some of them rely on that. Some of them rely on hornbills, for example, usually disperse figs very well because the fig seeds are extremely small, and so they can carry a lot of them. Yeah. And why don't they use the same nest? It's a great question. Mainly because it can be dangerous. Because when you're an orangutan, you're a very large-bodied animal, and especially if you have an infant as well. And if you're in a tree overnight, you don't want to fall. So it's usually kind of just like a quality control, really. They build a nest and they know that because they've built it and because it's fresh, it's going to be stable. And they test it too. They're really strong about that. There's really interesting work by Aini Hassana, who's done amazing work with drones as well, looking at the sort of how the orangutans build their nests and the structure of different nests using drones. And they're really strong. Yeah, they're very stable platforms. Do any other creatures use orangutan nests after the orangutans vacate them? I don't know. I haven't seen that, and hi Ben. I haven't seen that before. There are nests that are made that look very similar to orangutan nests. So some bears make nests, and also ground squirrels, giant tree squirrels make nests. But I'm not sure about making nests. Using nests that have been vacated. I wouldn't be surprised if um, some animals do, but it'd be pretty rare. Um, yeah. Also, a really interesting, a really well, useful aspect of the work as well as I forgot to mention with the drones. It's part of the reason we use them is because fieldwork is very difficult, particularly in areas that are hard to access. And drones are useful as well because the biggest problem we had in the field was actually not being able to get to the plots because roads break. So having a drone was useful because we could actually just fly there instead of having to go there each time. So made it really helpful. Do the material of nest varies for each location? So that's a really good question. So it depends on the tree species that are available. So there is a tree species called Belian, and they're very hard wood species. And they found that when orangutans make nests in there, they nest with this tree species. They actually last for a really long time, up to like 3 years. It's such a hard, dense wood. So the orangutans know which tree species to use to make nests and which would be the most stable. And so they're very selective in that as well. So they'll choose the best that's available. So it depends on the material. So it depends on kind of the forest quality where they're making the nest. If it's low quality forest, so quite say recently logged or quite small trees, then they'll kind of use whatever's available and just make it with a lot of branches, make sure it's safe. But if it's a very kind of high quality forest, then they'll use the hardest wood they can find. Um, yeah. Anyway, I think I might have to jump off over my time limit. But thanks so much, everyone, for joining and listening. It's been really fun. And if you have any questions, pop them in the live chat here, and or message me on Twitter. But thanks very much, and thanks everyone involved in the project. Really appreciate it. Oh, last question. How much area can you map in one drone flight, and how long can you stay at airport for? The drone, not yourself. You can with a copter about 20 minutes, with a fixed wing drone about an hour. And with a fixed wing drone, you have a lot less connection when we're flying it, so it was pretty tense moments trying to get it back without losing battery. But between that, fixed wing drones an hour, copter 20 to 30 minutes. But the battery capacity is improving, so it'll probably be much longer soon. Anyway, thanks very much, and yeah, everyone staying healthy, staying well. Thanks a lot. Bye.